It's The Drive right here on Fox Sports 910 Phoenix. Jody Ayler joined by our official Fox Sports 910 legal expert, Big B, Byron Browne from the Browne Law Group, joins us via the Sanderson Ford Hotline. And Byron, we got a couple things to get to today. We're going to talk a little hockey. No, that's right up your alley. Yep. And also, let's start, though, with our old friend Lance Armstrong was in the news this week. It's been a while, but there was a $100 million lawsuit against Lance Armstrong that was recently settled. So let's start here. What was this lawsuit about, and what was Lance Armstrong facing?
So Floyd Landis is the one who originally brought the lawsuit under the whistleblower statute back in 2010. And so what that had to do with was Floyd Landis came out, said that Lance cheated, and then he no longer was on the team. So he essentially said, hey, listen, that's not fair. I blew the whistle, and now you guys let me go, and that's what the whistleblower statute is there for. So then in 2012, the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, after Armstrong came out in an interview and said, hey, I took performance-enhancing drugs, then the federal government came in under the False Claims Act, joined that lawsuit because they said, hey, listen, under the Postal Service banner, when we sponsored your team, you committed a fraud upon us by taking that money under false pretenses. Well, I guess not false pretenses, but under fraudulent terms, meaning we didn't know that you were a cheater. Now you came out and said you're a cheater, and that doesn't make us look very good. And then Lance's position on the opposite side was, hey, listen, you put up that money to sponsor us because it gave you a whole bunch of good publicity. You got that. You got your money's worth plus some. So no one really did anything wrong.
Yeah. What's interesting to me about that is the assumption or the claim that when the United States Postal Service signed Lance Armstrong to basically represent them, that there was, unless there was an explicit document that said that he had to be clean, I mean, at that point, they're just sort of hoping he is, right? I mean, if Lance Armstrong were cheating, unless the U.S. Postal Service tried to find out whether he was cheating or not, isn't it also on them to find out that information?
No, because whenever you enter into any contract, you're assuming that the individual you're entering into the contract with is everything compliant with the law, right? So they assumed, that he wasn't a cheater. And actually, in the second contract that they entered into with Armstrong and the team when they sponsored it, they put in an anti-doping provision.
Gotcha.
So they were under the assumption that obviously cycling's regulated and that, hey, listen, you guys are doing everything compliant within that regulatory field, so we're going to sponsor you within that. So it's like every contract that everybody enters into, there's an implied covenant, meaning it doesn't have to expressly be written, of good faith and fair dealing. So with them, they would say, hey, listen, we had this good faith understanding that you weren't a cheater.
Yeah.
Now you've admitted you're a cheater, so you breached that. And then plus, being the federal government as it is, they, bring in the False Claims Act.
Right.
To button it up.
What's interesting, and I want to get to the specifics about this a little bit more in depth, but what sort of popped into my head was this lawsuit potentially a precedent? Because I think Barry Bonds didn't get sued by San Francisco Giants fans or the San Francisco Giants, or, we've had a lot of cheaters in sports, baseball, track and field, every sport's had cheaters at this point in terms of performance-enhancing drugs, but none of them have really faced this kind of lawsuit. Does this open up the possibility that if you cheat in sports, your team, your organization, the fan base could possibly come after you and seek damages?
I don't think the fan base, you've heard some stuff, right? Like even when Pacquiao fought Floyd Mayweather, right?
Yeah.
And then Pacquiao came on and goes, oh, hey, I had a bum shoulder. And then people who bought it said, hey, listen, we wouldn't have bought it if we knew you had a bum shoulder.
Right.
And that went nowhere quick. So I don't think it sets a precedent as it relates to that. I think what it sets a precedent for is if there's federal funding or federal sponsorship money gone somewhere, you better play by the rules because the government isn't going to F around. And that's even what we've talked about before, right?
Yep.
When we were talking about the NCAA.
Yep.
Is I think it's the same thing, is once it comes out so bad, those government officials are like, hey, listen, you're not going to make us look silly. We look silly, and now we have the ability to fight back, and now they're fighting back.
I see. So it's like if the U.S. Postal Service wants to come represent a NASCAR driver or something, or be one of the patches on an NBA team, you better make sure that everything's on the up and up.
100%. Best way to look at it. Yep.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more. And Byron Browne joining us here from the Browne Law Group on the Drive, Fox Sports 910 Phoenix, our official Fox Sports 910 legal expert. Specifically, it was a $100 million lawsuit. He settled for $5 million. What does that tell you?
Well, there's obviously, whenever you go to trial in any case, there's risks on both sides. So I think it's an understanding on both sides. We always say you manage your risk, right? So the federal government, like any case, isn't ironclad, and I think there was probably some concerns on their end that there has been no unjust enrichment on the Postal Service. Mm-hmm. They were afraid of that defense, because if you're on the jury and you're like, okay, listen, you guys are upset that you paid him millions of dollars, you got all the publicity you wanted to within that contract, and no one's privy to the terms of that, but it would have been fleshed out. So I think the lawyers sit there and look at everything, how much time has passed. I'm sure there's other political reasons that go into it. And they said, listen, if we can get this. Now, the other thing is I wonder what would have happened if they got a big judgment against him, because if you declare bankruptcy, a lot of that is going to get washed away. Right. So there could be another thing. Again, I think it's many things playing together where then they go, okay, here we got, one in the hand instead of two in the bush. Let's take the one in the hand and run.
It's like the federal government would have had a really hard time proving, like, Joe, person would be like, oh, I was going to mail this birthday card to my grandma, but that damn Lance Armstrong, I'm going to FedEx it instead. Like, what are the chances somebody's going to avoid the U.S. Postal Service because Lance Armstrong cheated?
Well, and that's the exact thing. I think it's at some point that it becomes they've sent their message. Yeah. The message was received. We're talking about something that's been going on for 8 years. They've been involved with it for 6. So they beat him up enough. Yeah, he spent his money on lawyers. I mean, message sent, right?
Right.
If you come up against them, they're going to fight you.
Yeah.
And it's not odd. At the end of the day, it's not odd that something settles, whether it's criminal or civil. Like we talked about Conor McGregor, stuff settles on the criminal side and stuff settles on the civil side as well. And so what we saw here isn't uncommon. It's more common than anyone would think.
Interesting. All right, so hopefully that's the last we hear about Lance Armstrong. I mean, I've been sick of that guy for a while. Hopefully this is his final punishment and he can go live his life in anonymity, because I find his character, at least when it came to this, to be detestable. And he's one of those guys. I don't root for the redemption of Lance Armstrong professionally. I don't wish anything harm upon him personally. But I hope professionally it's the last time we have to worry about Lance Armstrong. Now,
I agree.
Let's talk about something a little bit more, inspiring, uplifting, interesting. The Las Vegas Golden Knights, the expansion franchise in the NHL right now, swept first round, and now we're in the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. This is a huge deal in the NHL right now that an expansion team is the Stanley Cup favorites.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's awesome for the sport. It's awesome for the city of Las Vegas. I lived there at one point in time, and then obviously what happened there, the tragedy that happened, I think it gave the city something to root for. And I mean, you talk to the people that live there and the season ticket holders, I mean, they couldn't be prouder. So for the fan base, I think it's great. But then obviously there's that anomaly of a hockey franchise, expansion franchise team, let alone an expansion team in any professional sport doing as well as they have. I think it's awesome. And it's a story that I think no matter what team you're on, it's still hard to not root for them or in your heart of hearts be like, hey, I hope they go the whole way, because if they do, it'd be super cool if they won the Stanley Cup. Again, I don't care who you are, and it's like their first season, so how many people can hate them at this point? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not like you can be a Cowboy fan and hate the Patriots. It's like they haven't been around long enough to garner that much hate.
It is probably a record that would never be broken, an expansion team winning a championship. And we talked about, like, there's never been an expansion team in professional sports history that has finished a season above 500, let alone made the playoffs. So they've already made history. I will tell you my one beef with Las Vegas Golden Knights. I think the Golden Knights is a terrible nickname. It's Vegas. There's so many things distinct about it. The Golden Knights is too generic. I understand the owner's connection, but it's a bad nickname.
Yeah.
I think it's a bad nickname.
You know what's funny is I thought it was a bad nickname too at first. It's kind of grown on me. It's kind of grown on me.
Did you see that the week before the playoffs, they were offering free tattoos to any fan that wanted to come down to the arena? They had tattoo artists on site there was a line, dozens of people getting a free Golden Knights tattoo, like a real tattoo.
Wow, that's crazy.
There has to be some legal liability there. Like you're just handing out free tattoos on the street.
You'd hope they'd have people sign waivers before they got the tattoos.
So is that your prediction? You think Vegas will win the Stanley Cup?
You know what? I don't think they're going to win the Stanley Cup. I mean, I'd love to see them, don't get me wrong, but I just think there's so many teams out there that are doing so well. And I think now that they being the Golden Knights have moved through the Kings, they're going to be so much more on everybody's radar, even if they weren't, because obviously they were so successful during the regular season. But, you got the Penguins, Capitals have been around forever. And these teams have been, but these teams have been in there for so long that I think that experience, and now they got guys.
San Jose.
Yeah, they got guys that have been around forever. I mean, the Knights do too, but again, these are guys on these other teams have all been in the trenches together. And if you talk to any professional athlete who's been through it, it's that experience of knowing you got to take it to the next level and maintain it and grind through it. The Knights could do it again. It'd be awesome if they did, but I just don't think they're going to pull it out.
Already making history, should be fun to watch. Byron Browne, our Fox Sports 910 legal expert. And you might as well be our hockey expert as well, because you know a hell of a lot more about it than I do. Great stuff. Always look forward to the conversation.
I appreciate it. Thank you.